Welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. My name is Dusty,
And I'm Daniel.
and today we are covering Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin for Pride Month. So, happy Pride Month to anybody who celebrates that.
Yes, happy Pride Month to all of our friends, family, and listeners in the LGBTQ community. I'm pretty excited about this book. I I've heard quite a bit about James Baldwin over the years, and occasionally have read some of his short form pieces and like his essays. And of course his quotes and various portions of interviews that have popped up on the internet over the years, especially I've noticed over the last say 6 or so. Uh, but this is the first time I've actually read one of his novels.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever heard of him personally. It was I think it was when we were talking about what to cover this month, and you kind of recommended it. You said that it was like a pretty well known one, and we looked through like a bunch of different lists of really good, really impactful LGBT novels, and that was the one that just consistently kept showing up on all the lists. So yeah, I was like, okay, it's got to be good. It's got to have some really good writing and some really good messaging in there if it's going to show up on all these lists this consistently. So, you know, thought why not?
Yeah, and um, I'll have some early thoughts just kind of off the top here. I will say, I think it's lived up to its reputation, well, its reputation, but James Baldwin, specifically his reputation for being just an excellent writer. The prose is very smooth and very, even though the book itself is very short, and the portion that we're going to be covering in my edition was only about 70 pages. Um, I was able to read it with such facility and with such ease because it's just so well written and just it flows. Just good sense of rhythm and timing. Just really good work. Also, I would like to say I really think that he does. So one of the things we tend to say a lot because we read good books is the characters. This author really wrote these characters very well. I would say that is absolutely 100% true, but sometimes there's different shades of meaning to that. Sometimes they're just very memorable, sometimes they're very impactful, sometimes they're very stylized, so to say. But I think Baldwin does a very good job of writing very real seeming characters in both the, for everything that entails in their positive, more noble traits, and in their the ways they can be callous or bad to one another. I think he portrays this all in a very real way.
Yeah, I think the way you worded it, it being smooth, was very on the nose. I read this entire section in one sitting. It only took like an hour and a half. Like you said, it's not a very long book, so that's not really surprising. But yeah, it's a lot of it does kind of feel to me. I don't want to say stream of conscious, because it does seem to kind of like jump around a lot in terms of like where in the timeline of David's life we're at. And it really just kind of changes on a whim. He'll think back to this story, we'll be back to the present, then he'll think back to this story, then back to the present, and it's never really jarring. And it almost feels, I don't want to say dreamlike either, but I don't know. It's very well done. The way that Baldwin wrote this. Man, it's just kind of one of those things where I'm reading it and I just kind of have to like think to myself at some point. I'm like, man, this dude is just he was very very talented to just be able to write in this way, because like I feel like something that's super underrated with authors is the way like how important prose really can be and how hard it is. I don't know how many people have tried writing. I've tried my hand on it a lot of times. We've even shared little fun writings that you and I have done. I think that was in Neuromancer. um, but it's it requires a lot of technical knowledge, a lot of literary knowledge, and just the way that I'm reading it and I'm thinking, man, I will never be able to write this good. This is just so detailed, so smooth, so just very well done, and it's been a really really fun read so far. I've really enjoyed part one so far. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, I think anybody that could write, like James Baldwin, that's like so far. That's no one to compare yourself to because he's just such an incredible talent.
Yeah, I mean, it's like listening to a professional concert musician, playing like piano or something, and they're playing, classic music that's just insanely complex and whatnot, and you're just looking and you're like, man, I'll never be as good at piano as that person, and it's like, yeah, sure, you shouldn't compare yourself to a professional, but it's just kind of one of those things to where I can't help but look at that and be like, damn, that dude really knew how to write.
Yeah, and it's really a pretty um. I'll put it this way: there is a potential world where we were not given the ability to read um, the works of this very talented author um, because of uh, it's just two very large societal prejudices that were kind of arrayed against him. James Baldwin, for those who may not be aware, was a black man from America, and he was also a gay man. And so, um, given the subject matter of this book and also his race, that probably set a lot of people, given the general societal prejudices at the time, probably very dead set against this book or him as an artist going anywhere. So I am very grateful that we were able to read this book, and I think it's a true testament to just how unbelievably remarkably talented he was, that he was able to cut through all of that, just on the strength of this masterful work here.
Yeah. Um, what do you know what year this book was published?
I think it was 1956.
Yeah, the 1950s were certainly not very kind to gay people nor black people. So I can't even begin to imagine what his day to day life could have been like.
Well, I think there's a reason he moved to Paris, which is where this novel takes place. I think it was just after a while, I think you just get it was probably really wore on him, and so maybe it was and there was a lot of black artists, jazz musicians, for example, that actually moved to Europe over the years, just because it was. I mean, Europe is is not a place without racism. I don't want to give that impression, but I mean, a lot of artists really felt like they were a lot more readily accepted in Europe than they were in America. So I think that gives a little bit of a window into how difficult it must have been for him, that he had to leave his country and to move to a different country where he did not speak the language.
Yeah. Which that's kind of something I was wondering while I was reading this, because a decent amount of this first part takes place. I feel like I can safely say it's a gay bar. If it's not officially, it's like the most unofficially official gay bar ever. Uh,
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't know about France, but I mean, homosexuality was illegal in many places of the world, including, I think, the United States at this time. So it was probably not officially, but it was probably like a very unofficial kind of thing.
like one of those open secret kind of things.
Yeah, that's my supposition.
Yeah, so that's kind of to leads to what I was wondering throughout reading this section is one, is this taking place around the same time it was published? So because it seemed very kind of post-war to me in terms of like some of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I picked up on, and two, what was France's stance on homosexuality in that time period? Because I genuinely don't know. I mean, in America, it's really only been in the last, really kind of 10 to 15 years where socially it's gone from being seen as unacceptable to seen as a joke to seen as finally being accepted and shown as an actual normal part of life that's no different than any other sexual orientation. So it's still a fairly new thing to be overwhelmingly accepted in modern society in America. So I'm just really wondering, like 70 years ago in France, how different or how similar were they to us back then?
That is a good question. Maybe that's something we circle back with, and maybe it's something that we will see at later in the novel. I get the sense just from the novel that if it is not particularly condoned per se, it's not. It's also it's not like vigorously crusaded against. I don't know. That's just the sense I get from this first part, because we only read up to the first part of the book. So maybe this is just the circles that they travel in. But that's kind of the sense, because they interact with some people that are outside of the LGBTQ community, that the subtext leads me to believe that they are understanding of the situation, and they're not particularly vexed about it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Because so to kind of very briefly mention a plot point that we get shown pretty early. We learned that the titular character Giovanni, who is not our main character, who's named David, in terms of where the present is, the present day storyline is, Giovanni is set to be executed the next morning. And at first I was wondering if it had something to do with a sort of gay prejudice that France had, some like really ass backwards kind of like thought process. And that's kind of what I initially thought. And then I'm reading it more, and we haven't been told exactly what it is that Giovanni did, and I'm assuming that's going to be the climax of the novel. But the little details that we've gotten, the kind of hints and inferences that we've been given, I'm starting to wonder if he like murdered somebody or something.
That it could be. It does seem like it's heading. I don't know. That is kind of the picture that it paints in these flash forward sequences where we are with David as he's reflecting on what is about to occur to Giovanni. I think there's two instances of that I remember specifically.
We're gonna have a scene with Jacques where he comes up to David and he's like, "David, we have to go back." So to kind of jump into the plot and stop dancing around it a little bit, So yeah, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the present day storyline features David, who's still in Paris, and Giovanni uh, is set to be executed the next day. So, in order to kind of get a little bit of setup into what kind of person David is and the kind of story so far that led to, it very much kind of is one of those you're probably wondering how I got here kind of things, but much more masterfully done instead of just Thor sitting in the cage or being wrapped up in a chain, being like, "Hi, my name is Thor Odin's son. You're probably wondering how I got here. It's a funny story." There's a lot more. It's done with a lot more nuance. Um, so we get, I would say, three very important stories that kind of show what kind of person David is and the things in his life that kind of led him to France and to Giovanni. And it kind of jumps around a little bit in terms of like his past, because this first story, which is about his fiance Hella, is like fairly recent. And then we have it's within the last like 2 years, I want to say. And then we have the story about Joey, which was when he was a teenager. And then we have the story with his father, which is throughout his teenage years, all the way up to him coming to France. So with Hella, as I mentioned, she is, as I understand it, she is his fiance. I know the woman, the maid at the end of this section, referred to her as his fiance, and he did ask her to marry him, but I don't remember her actually saying yes. I feel like she was pretty non-committal.
Um, I think that's part of part of what we look at when they're describing his relationship with Hella is it doesn't feel. It doesn't. It feels like it's two people that are in a relationship that are just taking the next step because that's the next step. It does not necessarily seem like, particularly in David's case, that they are overly in love with one another.
Yeah, and there's so like basically she's from Spain, right? Or is she from America and they met in Spain?
I think they're both from America.
Okay, yeah, I think it was either she came from Spain to Paris and that's how he met her, or he met her in Spain, or the details I guess are not really that important, but something to do with I think no, you know what it was, she was going back to Spain and then going back to America. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what was going on.
Yeah, so he had a relationship with her, and he thought that he loved her, and eventually he asks her to marry him, and she's, like I said, I'm pretty sure she's super non-committal about it. And then he has this moment near the end where he realizes that he thought he loved her, but as I understand it, it was my interpretation of Hella is that she was somebody that he felt was someone who would fit what his father's expectations of what kind of person he should be, and also by proxy what society's expectations of what kind of person he should be is. So this was him trying to force himself into that like square peg round hole kind of situation, where he's trying to fit into a stereotypical societal role for a man at that time, and this was him trying to get the woman, get the family, yada yada, and him trying to convince himself that he was in love with her. But then when things kind of break down at the end, not necessarily in a bad way, but just in a, hey, I'm leaving to go here, and he's like, I want to marry you, and she's just like, ah. I think that's when he realizes what she really is to him, and that is really just kind of a facade for someone that he's not. I don't know. Did you get anything similar to that, or is that just me?
Well, like I said, I think it's very much that they're just kind of two people that are kind of going through the motions, and I think that's why, especially I think at this time period, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it would be pretty, not like unheard of, but I think it'd be surprising that she would be like leaving Paris, without him to go travel on her own. I think generally speaking, I think this is their relationship, does not strike me as particularly warm, and I think they're just. I think that they whatever relationship they had is fraying pretty quickly. Is my sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of really took it as just kind of a I don't want to say fake romance, but just a not even necessarily a flash in the pan either, but just kind of one of those things to where um yeah, you're just once again not fake, but you're just trying to be something you're not, and so you're trying to fit a mold that does not fit you, and I think that might go for her as well because she seems to not really be the type of person that would be with him. I feel like I'm just kind of saying in dumber ways what you've already said, so I'm just gonna move on. Um, I don't really have anything else really to say about Hella. Honestly, she really is just kind of a. I really feel like she's a conduit to set up his kind of I don't want to say sexual frustrations, because that doesn't sound right, but more like his his battles with his orientation, I guess. His inner conflicts with his sexual orientation. Does that sound fair?
Well, we do. I mean, I think it's interesting that we can contrast it. The way he's thinking about Hella, with his recollections of his youth and his later later what he does with Giovanni. And I think it can be, I don't know, maybe I'm I don't want to overstate the case, but I think especially because these are presented in pretty close proximity to one another, that there's there's an implication there.
Slight aside, how close is Joey to Giovanni in terms of like naming schemes? Like, is Giovanni like the Italian equivalent of Joey?
That's a good question. Why don't we look it up? I think Giovanni.
Maybe Johnny.
But that could be a very.
I know there's a lot of with like anglicized names, so to say. There's like you can find the name of origin, the language of origin for a name, like things like
It seems to be the Italian version of John. Giovanni.
Darn. What would Joey be short for?
That's a good thought, though.
Joseph, probably.
Joseph?
Yeah, because like for example, just to use a more kind of relatively common one was Jesus is. I don't want to say the Anglicized because it's not that's not really correct, but like Jesus, his name wasn't Jesus. It was actually if I remember correctly, I feel like his name. Translated to English would have been actually closer to not Joseph, but
isn't it Joshua?
Joshua, thank you. I was getting so stuck there.
It's like Yeshua to like Joshua.
Yeah, exactly. So I was wondering if Giovanni was the same for Joey, but I guess it's for John, and I did say it might be Johnny. So I don't know. Weird tangent aside, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Giovanni and Joey in terms of like their them being important to David's his sense of self. I don't know. And I feel like Giovanni and Joey are very similar sounding names. So maybe I'm just trying to pull a conspiracy where there isn't one. But anyways, to have this very, very clean segue, now we learn about Joey, who was David's childhood friend. And they spent every day in the summer together. I don't remember if he says how old he was at the time. He just says teenager.
I think it's like a young teen, like 14, 15, somewhere in there, I would imagine.
Yeah, my thinking was like 16, 17, which this doesn't really make this any less likely. But there's a whole bit where they're drinking.
Didn't he say that? And you might be right. For some reason, I remember that he said something like wasn't he in high school when all of this happened, and then there was like 2 more years, and then after he graduated, he never saw him again, something like that.
I know there was at least one more school year after this. So
Maybe 16, 17 is right. I'm just for some reason I thought 2 school years.
Yeah. So it's summer vacation. They're hanging out every day, and they spend a day at the beach, oogling women and doing, I don't know, teenage boy hijinks in that time period. Uh, and there's a bit where they're just kind of hanging out naked. Like they went and they showered together, not like together, but like they showered together. It might have been some sort of communal thing. I'm not really sure. And they're like whipping each other with towels, as guys do, I guess. And they just David kind of realizes that he doesn't really have a want to. I don't know. There seems to be some sort of intimacy that David is feeling in the moment that he's not really sure about, and it kind of culminates when they're going to bed for the night, and they're both sleeping in the same bed. Which I don't know about you when you were younger and you were like hanging out and sleeping over with friends and whatnot, but that's not the most uncommon thing. Like just kind of sharing a bed, because it's like, well, sorry, dude, we're over at my house. We only got one bed. Whatever. So they're sleeping in bed together, and Joey kind of is acting a little silly, and David does the thing. He apparently kind of takes his head and kind of like pulls him a little in some kind of thing that they jokingly do together, or they have in the past. But this time, he like pulls him onto his chest, and they share a kiss, and then something awakens inside of David. Yeah, something awakens inside of David, and the next morning, he's really, really conflicted about it, because he's looking at Joey, who's still asleep. He compares him to a baby because of the way that he's sleeping, but he's got big arms and big legs, and he's very manly looking, not at all like a woman, and that's causing a lot of confusion and stress in him, which I can only imagine is very common. I cannot speak through experience, so I'm just really extrapolating. I can only imagine is a very common thing for people who aren't really given proper context as to what they feel, or like being told what they are allowed to feel. So I imagine it is very confusing when something that is maybe which at the time was seen as some massive taboo, and you're realizing that it's something that is what you are. It's a very, very not fun experience at the time. So there's the really interesting thing about this bit is he's trying to remove himself from the situation, but he's also desperately wanting Joey to ask him to stay, to like give him some affirmation as to what they did, but because Joey is probably also feeling similar emotions, they both are pretty cold towards each other, and that ostensibly is the end of their friendship. They don't see each other again for the rest of the summer, and when the next school year starts, David is very cold. He gets a new group of friends, and he's very mean and cruel towards Joey, to the point to where Joey eventually just moves away, and he never sees him again. And he, like I said, he's thinking to himself, like, what he really truly wanted was for Joey to, like, just, I guess, make it real. But he was hiding from himself as well. That caused him to ostensibly lose his best friend. And that's a tragedy.
This whole passage is very tragic. I really feel for both characters, and it really makes you think about how many times that must have played itself out over the years, just because of pretty ridiculous and arbitrary, taboos. It just very the portion in particular I found very affecting.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it's still fairly new for any LGBT acceptance to be as widespread as it is nowadays. It's still a fairly new thing, so I can't.
And it's not total even.
It's not,
so,
no.
So
Anything less than 100% is unacceptable, if you ask me. And just to, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things to where I'm trying to put myself in the character situation to try and empathize, but all I can really do is sympathize because it's just not something that I know. So I'm really, it's, I just can't imagine what that feels like for anybody that has to go through that, that ever had to go through that. And there are still some places in America, definitely all over the world, but like in America where people are probably still forced to feel that way, and that's a fucking crime. Like that can happen still to this day. So it's a bummer, dude. Like, so yeah, that's the Joey section. But I guess one last thing I want to quickly mention is the way that he talks about Joey, the way that he feels about him during their embrace and Jesus. I don't know is it okay to say sex scene? Like, and it's kids still, so I feel very awkward about it.
Sure, but it's understandable. But
yeah,
I think this portion is very true to the experience of a lot of young people, gay and straight alike. It's a thing that does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
So
one thing that I want to point out that David is the way that David speaks about Joey and how he feels with Joey, and it's I don't know, man. I for lack of a better term, it's a very beautifully written passage. The way that he describes the feelings that he's feeling in the moment. I don't know. I thought it was just very, very well done, and it's one of those things to where it's like you can tell that this is who David is. This is the kind of person that he is, and him trying to deny that, or anyone trying to deny that, is just. Yeah, I feel like this is probably one of those things where people would point to and say have proof that it's not a choice, it's who you are. I feel like I've completely lost my point here.
That's okay. I think this is a very well written passage. I think it's it shows the dichotomy of the life that we are forced to, I say we broadly, but specifically in this time, I guess I would, we'll be specific here. Specifically, the difference in the lives that people in the LGBTQ community had to live their lives. Both, like, there's a dual life, a life inside the room, Giovanni's room perhaps, and the outside world. And in this inside world, there is this sort of, there's it's very normal in the sense that there's a lot of, tenderness and affection, and it's, things that we, would positively associate. And then, but outside of the protective bubble, and, the bubble itself is influenced by the sort of broader, negative, darker cultural forces that force them to behave a different way, in the public eye. And I think that's a key little aspect of this book that we need to kind of keep our eyes on as we progress through.
Yeah. And so the last, I guess, precursor story we have about David prior to Paris is with his father, his relationship with his father. And this one is I really kind of want to go a little quickly through it because it's definitely the longest of the three, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of it is just kind of not necessarily like circular, but it's just multiple ways of just kind of getting to the same point, which is that he grows to eventually despise his father, not necessarily because of anything his father did. It seems like it's because of what his father didn't do. But his
Yeah, and what his father kind of represents as well.
yeah. So his mother died when he was young, and he doesn't really remember her much, but he still has nightmares about her. Um, so they've been living with his aunt, his father's sister, has been living with them for much of his childhood, and they fight a lot. His dad and his sister. She's like, I don't think she's very good. If I'm being honest here.
No, she's not like the best, in the world. But she does make some good points in the fact that, or to the effect that David's father is not really showing up for. I mean, she does a lot of the whole like plays into a lot of the stereotypes of the time of like, oh, you have to be a man's man and do this. What his father is really doing wrong, at least from my perspective, is he's just really not there at all for his son. He's often out, partying and drinking and that kind of thing, instead of spending time with his son. And he's not really. He doesn't really. He may love his son in a certain sense, or in a very real sense, perhaps, but he doesn't know his son, and he doesn't really make a strong effort to do so.
Yeah, he falls into one of the. It feels like it's a pretty common trap to where it's his father is trying to be his friend, not his parent, and so because of that he's failing on both counts.
Yeah.
But there's a big fight between. I don't even want to say a big fight. It was like maybe 5 or 6 sentences exchanged between the dad and the aunt, where he comes in drunk and she's like, she basically pulls a massive Streisand effect on David, to where she's like, oh, Dave, I know David thinks about where you're at all times with these women, and how you're not giving him a good example because all he sees is you being drunk and going out and spending time with your women. And David's sitting there like, I've never given that any thought before. Like he's hearing the argument from his bedroom. He's like, I've never really given that any thought before, but since she said it, now it's all I think about. And it's like, wow, great job there. But because after that, he learns that he kind of despises both of them, and she does also kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy too, because she says that he's going to follow his example because of him just being out and drinking all the time. He's going to make David think that's what normal is. And I don't know if this is so much to spite both of them, but that is kind of what David becomes. He goes out and he drinks a lot, and he ends up getting in this really bad accident because he drinks and drives. And he has a breakdown in the hospital with his father. And it's like this really sad kind of tender moment between the two of them, but like it's really fleeting. It only really lasts in that instant, and then it's just really kind of back to business as usual. And David then spends the rest of his teen life into his adulthood just basically putting on a facade in front of his father as to what kind of person his father wants him to be, and so he just keeps convincing his father that's who he is, so that he can just stop having to deal with him outside of the mandatory times he has to. So
and here we are again with the theme of the person who we are, in one context and inside, and who we portray ourselves to be.
Yeah, there was a really great treatise on things like this, that I really think that David could have done well reading, called "The Man in Me" by great analrapist Tobias Funke.
He's a leading expert in the field.
Yeah. So and he leaves to go to France. Why does he? I forgot. Does he say why he specifically goes to France?
Um, I'm just trying to remember. I'm just flipping through real quick. I think he does some. I don't know. I'm trying to remember all that happens here. He just kind of like he's going through like goes to college. He he joins the army for a little bit, right? I don't remember. I remember he was doing things. He was talking about doing things that he has to do to like keep up this facade with his father.
I know there were army grunts on the train with him, but I don't think that's where he I don't think he was part of the army during that.
No, it was a different time, I think. But he didn't remark on it extensively. Either way, I don't know if it actually explains why exactly he went to France.
Yeah, but it's at least it's at the very least a way for him to try to get away from his father.
And I think to kind of he's also kind of he's also not sure really. This is kind of the classic going on a journey to find yourself thing that I think that's kind of what at least David is viewing this as.
Yeah. And so this is where we get to the crux of part 1 and probably the crux of the story as a whole, and this is how he met Giovanni. And we kind of mentioned earlier the character Jacques. He is I don't know if I want to go as far as to say a friend of David's. It's more so just kind of an acquaintance and maybe even kind of a non-sexual sugar daddy, because he kind of gets a lot of money from Jacques to kind of help him with his financial woes when applicable.
Yeah, I think it's just a chance. It's just a means, perhaps, for Jacques to maybe live a little bit vicariously through David to meet and interact with other people. He doesn't seem necessarily the most socially adroit. He just kind of like, it's kind of unfortunate, but he's just the kind of guy that's there and that kind of is just tolerated, and people kind of use him. But he's also kind of, there's also like a lot of expectation that he puts on other people. I don't know, as particularly in regards to like, I don't know, sort of like romantic and that kind of things of that nature. I don't know. It just feels like he's this kind of peripheral figure that is kind of in this larger social milieu.
Yeah, and as I understand it, he's like early to mid 50s, and he's the person who takes David to the gay bar where he meets Giovanni, and oh man, what was the name? How did you pronounce the name of the owner of the bar? Like Guillaume? Guillaume?
It's pronounced Guillaume. Is it pronounced Guillaume?
Guillaume?
Or pretty close to that. No. What I said Guillaume.
Guillaume?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were cutting out or what. Yeah, and so there's the owner of the bar, Guillaume. Him and Jacques go back, and Jacques just kind of like pulls David along because I think Jacques knows that David is gay, and David is just refusing to admit it, and he's living. He knows Jock knows Hella, um, but he just kind of he can see David for at least a piece of who he really is, and they've come to this bar a couple of times, and allegedly, David has flirted with some of the male patrons as they have come and gone, but he doesn't remember because he was drunk. So as far as he's concerned, yeah, that probably didn't happen because he's still kind of lying to himself. But on this fateful night, he meets one of the new bartenders named Giovanni, and Jock immediately has eyes for him, and he's trying to flirt with him, but Giovanni's not really kind of playing along very well. So Jock tries to get David to be the instigator, be like, hey, ask him to have a drink with us, so that way you can be my in here, and if worst case scenario, you can just explain later that it was a misunderstanding, whatever. But that's very quickly really quickly thrown to the wayside because Guillaume.
Guillaume, yes.
Yeah. Guillaume comes and just kind of distracts Jock and pulls him away, and they're all having a merry old time doing whatever it is that they're doing. And that leaves David alone with Giovanni, and this is where would it be fair to call this a meet cute? Because it really felt like one.
I mean, they really hit it off.
Yeah, and I gotta say, man, this was a very fun scene to read. Like the immediate chemistry that the two of them had, the kind of playful back and forth, just kind of giving each other shit for being an Italian and being an American, and I don't know, it's just the way that the scene was written, the dialogue, all of the kind of little like nuances to it. It was just very fun, and I could totally see this happening in a traditional rom-com setting. It was very, very well done.
Yeah, Baldwin is firing on all cylinders. When you read through this passage, it's he's really cooking here.
Yeah, I very much could 100% believe the attraction between these two guys. Like it's it's very well done. I feel like it's very easy to trip on the for lack of a better term, once again, the meet cute of two romantic characters, and have their romance feel forced or unorganic, and it's really nice to see that that very much was not the case here. Just a very, very fun scene. It goes on for quite a while. It's a very, very long conversation that goes back and forth, and I love how David feels like he looks and he just feels like he's at the center of attention. There's a line he says where it's like all the tables kind of turn towards him and everyone's staring at them because they know, oh, look at that. It's almost, I swear, man, there's got to be some dude that's singing Beauty and the Beast in the background, just watching them just kind of do their little verbal dancing in the ballroom.
Yeah, and it's quite entertaining, so I'm sure people are enjoying the conversation.
Yeah. It might be important.
We certainly were.
Yeah. It might be important to also bring up, I don't remember when this happens over the course of this stint in the bar. I don't remember if it was, I think it was during one of the times that Giovanni had to step away because, believe it or not, he has to also do his job as well. A man comes up to yeah, it's while Giovanni's gone, because he's like, oh, you like that boy, don't you? He comes up to David, and I forgot what he calls him. It's like the something princess, because
yeah, this guy, he describes him in a very strange way. He describes him as a zombie. He says he like shambled out of the shadows like a zombie or something to that effect.
Yeah, and he's got like heavy makeup on. He's wearing a skirt, right? Like a skirt and boots.
Yes, I don't really know. This is one situation where it was difficult for me to fully understand what was happening there.
I really feel like this was kind of one of those kind of prophetic scenes where it's like you have your unconventional unconventional prophet coming to wax poetic to your main character about their quote unquote destiny. Obviously, not quite so grandiose as that, but like similar concept. Because like David is like really just dismissive towards this dude. Basically, tells him to fuck off, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with him. And this guy's just like it's.
I like it. Even when I read it, I did not fully comprehend. I could just tell David's distaste for this person, and the sort of sense of foreboding what they impart seems to represent, particularly with the context we get later of how things wind up for Giovanni.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I mean with it being like a somewhat prophetic moment, because this person really kind of prophesizes tragedy coming David's way, and so that's kind of how I took that. It was almost kind of like this all-knowing character coming in and giving a warning to the main character of their fate, as assuming they don't change paths or something.
And if this is a trans woman, this could also kind of work in again with this whole sense of like, despite himself being either a bisexual or gay man, he is reacting with disdain. If this is a trans woman, he's still kind of bound by societal expectations, and that perhaps that's why he describes why he describes the situation in the way he does, using the sort of negative connotations to describe this figure.
Yeah. So bit of a weird occurrence, but I definitely feel like it is gonna be relatively impactful in the grand scheme of things. Could not be, but that's just kind of I don't know. I feel like it's definitely worth bringing up. Yeah. So there before they leave for the night, Jock has a bit of a moment with David where he's talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, so are you gonna, I see the sparks. Are you gonna, go home with this dude? You gonna make something happen?" And David's being non-committal, and we get a really really interesting moment from Jock here where he's basically just saying, "Hey, dude, like, stop denying yourself happiness, or you're gonna become a bitter, non-feeling husk like I am. So like, live your life the way that you should. Live your life the way that is going to make you happy, and like stop pretending to be someone you're not, really." And it's like, wow, that's he probably says it in a lot more of a deeper way than I do.
Yeah, the way he says it is very profound and very haunting.
Yeah.
And it gave me a little bit more sympathy for Giovanni, who I think is supposed to be portrayed as being somewhat of an annoyance, somewhat of a pest, honestly. But I think there's a certain...
Do you mean Jock?
Moment of clarity. Oh, did I say...
You said Giovanni.
Jacques. Oh, well, sorry, I meant Jacques. But, I thought that was a very important moment.
Yeah. And so now, so the bar is closed. It's 5:30 in the morning, and Jacques, Guillaume, David, and Giovanni are wanting to have a bit of a nightcap. So Giovanni takes them to this place that he used to. He it seems like he still kind of goes there every now and again. I can't remember the name of the woman that runs it. It's Madame something. But they all meet. It's still open. They sit and they have some more drinks. I think this is where Jock talks to him, isn't it? Yeah, this is where Jock has that conversation with David about the make yourself happy.
I thought they talked when they were Giovanni had to go, like they were doing their little meet cute thing, and then Giovanni had to go serve drinks, and it was when he was like, "Oh, am I your friend? I don't know. I haven't decided yet. How could you not decided? No, you crazy Americans." And then he went to go like serve somebody a drink, and I thought that's when Jacques flagged him down, and they talked about that, and then Giovanni and then David continued their conversation
No,
after that.
I'm pretty sure it was right here because Giovanni is gone for a minute and he comes back and he's just like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to leave you alone for so long. I hope you weren't bored."
Maybe.
Yeah, they're still drinking a little more. And Guillaume and Jacques are trying to hit on some of the locals at this establishment, and Giovanni and David excuse themselves to the dining room to drink some white wine and eat some oysters and kind of chat a little more. And it's just more building on their relationship, more character writing, more just really just fun dialogue. And this all kind of culminates in ostensibly Giovanni asking David to come home with him, and David is, believe it or not, being non-committal. But Giovanni's he's laying it on really thick. He's like, "Oh man, you should. It's real dangerous for me in this state to go home alone. You should really just kind of you should help me out." And David's like, "All right, yeah, no, that, yeah, okay." So they take a cab back to Giovanni's room. I should also note that Giovanni, when they're taking the taxi to this second bar, he talks about how where he lives, and Guillaume is just like, "That sounds like such a great room. You should have a party there." And Giovanni's like, "Well, then we should do that sometime." And when him and David are about to go back to his place, he's like, "You're gonna see my room eventually. Why not start tonight?" And they get to his place. And David gets a reaffirmation of what he feels and what love can be, and they spend the night together. And I think that's the last flashback we get for this part. I think that's where it ends.
Yes, I think that's when we flash forward to him with the talking to the lady about leaving France.
Yeah. So the last little bit of part one here, we're back in the present. It's like that evening, and like we said earlier, Giovanni is sentenced to death that next morning, and there's a maid that's coming in to inspect the room and make sure that he's not taking inventory, and making sure that he's going to clean up. And he's like really, it's very strange. It almost feels like he's being interrogated at times, the way that he handles it, and it's like he's trying to stop himself from shouting at her or laughing at times, and it's just a very, very weird, uncomfortable situation for him. And she's goading him about Hella, but then also saying he should meet a different girl, a nice girl, and get married and have kids, and maybe go back to America. And just then she's doing her standard just kind of customer service kind of thing, where it's like, "I hope you've enjoyed your stay. Please come back and visit us soon." It's a very very weird.
Yeah, it was weird. I think she was well intended, but you could understand, you could feel the awkwardness in that exchange.
Yeah, and we do see a little bit of David's state of mind. He's been a little bit of a shut-in. He hasn't really been super active, super social. So clearly, whatever happened with Giovanni, it's affecting him in a really really negative way. I mean, I would hope so, given that he's set to be killed tomorrow. But yeah, David's probably not in the best state of mind. And I feel like a really great way of seeing that is when he thinks to himself that he's really glad that the maid didn't count the glasses, because he shattered 2 in anger recently. And that's
I've forgotten that part.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the end of part 1 here. Is David is getting ready to leave Paris, probably in the next day, and he's not really I think he's planning on going. He's not going to meet up with Hella. Not yet, at least. But that's kind of.
Sorry, go ahead.
But that's kind of the state of affairs at this point. We've gotten the introduction to the relationship between Giovanni and David. We've met, I'm assuming, most, if not all, of our principal characters. We know the conflict, which is Giovanni's fate, and now we just get to see we have point A and point B, and now we're going to see the line that connects the two in part two.
Yeah, I think it's this part is kind of set up all of the themes, all the plot dominoes, as it were, and now we're going to have to. I guess we'll have to see part two where this all ends up, and maybe it will answer some of those questions we had about French society and all of that stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Is it just me, or are you getting very similar vibes to this book that you did with The Stranger?
In a lot of ways. I mean, I think it was in The Stranger. Obviously, it was a colonial possession of France. There was an imposed version of French culture on and this is also very French because it takes place in France, and I think Baldwin does a good job of capturing the essential Frenchness of the location and of the people. But would say I think I like this better. I think there is a certain, I don't know. It's a. I'll put it this way. I think he is a better writer. And not to take anything away from that other book, but I think Baldwin is definitely a better writer.
Yeah. Would you say it has a certain je ne sais quoi?
I think that is a very apt way to put it.
Yeah. I don't mean to compare them so much so in terms of like quality or whatever, but I feel like there is like a somewhat similar structural kind of parallel to them. Like they're both two parts, and part one is set up that seems to work towards a falling of a relationship and possibly due to a crime, and part two is like the repercussions of that crime and like kind of the fate of the characters as to it. Maybe I'm reaching here.
It's also no, I mean there's a lot of parallels. Like there's the because it's a social drama in a French context. I think possibly involving in both cases murder. In both cases like involving in serious crimes. I think there's a lot of but and seen through the eyes of a narrator that is not really sure about the nature of themselves. I don't know. I think there's some decent,
Yeah, there are characters that are both.
Go ahead.
There are characters that are both seen as social outcasts.
That too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a little there's good cause for comparison. When you said that, I did not reject it. Certainly, like it was when you said that. My initial gut reaction was like, yeah,
Yeah, it's something that kind of was in the back of my mind throughout a lot of this. I do agree. I have enjoyed this more than The Stranger so far. I feel like my feelings towards this are how I expected to feel while reading The Stranger. Which no disrespect to Camus or anything, but yeah, I just get a lot of very similar vibes from this. But yeah, this
both short books. I don't know. I'm think this comparison is more and more fitting as we go. I wonder if we will see something else in the second in part two that really rounds that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Really enjoying this book so far. It's so beautifully written. It's got great characters, very great character writing, which if anybody has watched a lot of these, they know that's what I'm an absolute sucker for. Yeah, it's just very, very good book so far. I'm really glad that we picked this one because it's just very good. Highly recommend it so far. Part one, we're a little under halfway done with this book, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm already giving it my recommendation. Hopefully, part two doesn't change that, but I really don't think it will.
Yeah, I'm very much enjoying this as well. I think it's I don't know. I think this is the best I don't know how to quite orient it. We haven't done like a lot of like, well, I guess that's not fair because we haven't done like a lot of like romantic oriented books.
We've done like
But
two.
this does feel like, yeah. So I guess that's maybe not a fair statement, but I just feel the urge to give it some sort of accolade because I'm just it's just quite an achievement, and I think people who read the novel, and hopefully we'll get a little time next week to kind of bore down into some of these, particular phrases and turns of phrase and stuff that we're reading in this novel, but highly recommended.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll about do it for us this time. So, yeah, thank you everybody for listening. It's been another episode of Sad Boys Book Club. Everybody go check this book out. Go support your local library for one. I got this book from my local library. So once again, I'll always enjoy plugging. Go support your local library. Go support LGBT authors. Not just in June. It's you don't have to only do it 1 month out of the year. This is just the month that spotlights it. So yeah, happy Pride Month once again to everybody, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.